Hello, everybody. Warm welcome to our business conversation today. I'm very pleased to welcome Sergei Voitishkin, who is the managing partner of Baker McKenzie Russia CIS. Hello, Sergei. Very nice to be in touch in this route, and good to see you there in the office. I've had the pleasure over many years of listening to you at our live events and webinars. But the catalyst behind this is at those events, obviously, we ask you to speak for 8, 10, 14 minutes or something. And I sometimes feel we're missing out on more content and in-depth. So this is a very good way to catch up on that and to distribute it to all the group members. So very pleased to have you in this format. And my first question was really a personal one. Who are you? How did you get where you are? And what's your background?
Thank you, Danny. As always, it's a pleasure to be speaking to you. I enjoy your events, and I feel that they are very helpful in terms of understanding where the market is going. Well, personally, after graduating from university in 83. No, I started at 83, but I graduated in 88. So I started my career as a translator with TASS, the Soviet news agency. And I was also doing a lot of freelance translations, both written and simultaneous, for the likes of IMF, Comic-Con, other international organizations. At TASS, I worked for the World News Service for a few years. So in a way, I was a propaganda guy. I was briefly posted as a trainee correspondent for TASS in London. And in parallel, I started working for Kommersant, their English weekly, and became deputy editor-in-chief. When we closed Kommersant's English edition, I joined Baker's as a translator. I then did my law degree with Moscow State University, started working for Skadnarps in Moscow as a trainee, and then came back to Baker's as an associate, and have been working with the firm since '98 for more than 23 years. I've been a corporate and M&A lawyer, doing transactions in various industries, assisting clients to enter the Russian market, exit, in a few instances, have been involved in corporate conflicts, reorganizations, and as you said, currently I'm managing partner for CIS, which is Russia, Ukraine, and Kazakhstan, and I've been in this role for 9 exciting years.
Well, Sergei, I did know some of that background, but it was refreshing to hear titles such as TASS and Comic-Con, because I go back to those days as well, and I know what it means. I'd forgotten that you joined Baker McKenzie in 1998, which of course is a interesting year as well, to be doing things. And I was in Moscow a couple of weeks after the devaluation of August that year. But we're in a different kind of crisis, very different from '98. And obviously globally, before we move into Russia, globally 2020 was the COVID year, and well, it's not finished yet, of course, 2021. Just in general terms, what did you see happening in the business world and amongst Baker McKenzie clients globally, and how was the firm, your law firm, reacting globally?
Well, indeed, it has been a health and humanitarian crisis. And actually, some say that it was the most challenging global economic disruption since the Second World War. And we've seen disruption of supply chains, a fall in demand, obviously lockdowns, no travel, most economies contracted, lots of workforce challenges, remote work, a well-being crisis driven by fear and uncertainty, unemployment, furloughs. So a lot of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity at the extreme. And clients needed advice on how to operate in lockdowns, how to operate remotely, And there were lots of initially employment and regulatory issues because really it was a mess and people didn't know how to react. And that was aggravated by health-related issues. But on the positive side, I think there was a leap in digitization, in automation, shifting to online work. At the same time, clients were reorganizing, adopting new business models, becoming more agile. I think we realized that innovation is a must to survive. So obviously all this required lawyers to assist in reorganizations and adoption of new business models, ways of working, dealing with supply and demand disruptions, changing contracts, finding new partners. But to a large degree, this was still business as usual, with clients carrying on operations, looking for ways to navigate new challenges and being actually very, very resilient. So in this sense, ordinary legal support continued. Some areas obviously slowed down when courts stopped working because of the lockdowns or because regulators stopped work because, again, of the lockdowns. But I felt that was for a relatively short period. And then globally, obviously, governments intervened to help, and various countries saw all kinds of measures to support the economies. And I think from then on, things started to become a bit brighter, especially when vaccines sort of were rolled out. And I guess for me, in a sense, it was a very brief, a very shocking crisis, which then kind of became a bit optimistic. And frankly, if a year ago we were having a great year, I was thinking, wow, we are growing in Russia everywhere. It was very nice. Suddenly there was lockdown and things went into a nosedive. But now I'm again sort of optimistic with all the news that we are getting. So lots of transformational change for our clients, lots of transformational change for us. I'm happy that I think I mean, as always, and we've been through many crises in my jurisdiction, things eventually turned out to be much better than we expected.
That's a good note to end that opening remarks, again. Thank you. And I'll just fill in there. I've heard you speak recently, so I think you echo my comments. When I'm talking with many executives doing business, and we'll move to Russia now, a year ago, there was obviously a great fear and concern. Oh my God, we've lost our business forever. And that certainly was not the case. And I would suggest that maybe 80% of the clients we're working with, that we share with you, they survived well. They feel they've survived well. And actually, the 2021 has started well for many. It does vary across sectors, of course. I'd like to move into Russia now. And, you know, what you said there about the world, I'll come later just to forewarn you, you know, I'll ask for more detailed questions about digital, sanctions, compliance, but feel free to mention them now at the start and we can elaborate later. Because the question is, compared with the world, how did Russia behave as a market? How were your clients compared with what you've just said? And you said, you know, yes, Russia is a particular jurisdiction. What was the same as the rest of the world and what was different?
There are a lot of similarities, I should say. However, because, I mean, I think the lockdowns were easier in Russia. Also quite, I mean, most top managers were vaccinated very early. And a lot of the industry was not actually shut down. Things continued. And I think this affected essentially the condition that the Russian market is in. Because at the start of the pandemic, the main question we were getting was, do we actually qualify as an industry exempt from lockdowns because we are, I don't know, because we have a contract with Gazprom or whatever. And I was surprised how well the government acted, to be honest. And one of the surprises was the healthcare situation, because you normally expect things to be quite sort of difficult in the healthcare sector, but we had a couple of instances where my personal friends ended up with COVID, and they were very surprised how effectively the healthcare system worked for them. That being said, again, I think the fall in demand in our market, because it's a developing market, was initially deeper than elsewhere. But the economy is still resilient, and I think the reason for that is that we are so used to crisis. And the leaders of most, I mean, all our clients, for all of our clients in Russia, this is probably what, the fifth or the sixth crisis. So nothing new, to be honest. Everybody realized that you have to be very quick, very focused. People acted very quickly to cut costs, to look at alternative supply routes, not very bothered about being too bureaucratic, I should say, and embraced remote work and digital and all that very quickly. So I think the market reacted very positively, better than some other developing markets. And that brings a sense of excitement to me personally, and as a lawyer working in the sector. But as usual, we've also seen, say, changes in government regulations and pressure from government authorities on some of our clients, including like platforms and digital ecosystems, because they were addressing, and they are currently addressing, access and say data privacy issues in Russia, trying to force platforms to, say, localize in a way. So that has been also a very noticeable drive. And I would say that for Russia, localization is the word probably in many respects, starting from incentives to start local production, to changing regulations, to, well, pressure multinational clients to localize. But then there is all clearly another trend to ensure that Russia is self-sufficient in critical technologies and critical products. So I think these are the major trends that affect the market, how the government behaves, and obviously this requires legal support. So that's a source of work for us.
Thanks a lot. I'll want to flesh this out with you, but just want to say, yes, localization, and you use the words incentives and pressure, which is definitely the case. We're seeing that globally. I think globally also with the crisis, the supply chains, probably increasing global protectionism. More of our clients, mutual clients, are looking at localization generally. Now, whether they're all going to do it is another story. And localization, as you well know, Sergei, does not necessarily mean building a big factory, but localizing staff, localizing supply chains, localizing marketing, etc., etc. And I think that will be more the case. You've certainly mentioned, you know, those things that they need. Oh, and sorry, I want to echo increasing regulation. We're seeing that in Russia, of course. Governments are adapting to the changed environment and changing and bringing in new regulation. And we're seeing that across Asia, Middle East, and other markets as well. Just on an operational basis, day-to-day, you mentioned localization and the IT software industry, but has there been a big pickup in requests on compliance, or much less on M&A or HR related? What are the more mundane operational legal things you're dealing with?
Employment requests were probably the most frequent ones, because everybody was dealing with how we do terminate staff, how do we work remotely, how do we regulate that. So I would say that is probably a number one topic in the pandemic. But gradually it has become, in a way, business as usual, with requests for how do we digitalize our industry, what are the issues, how do we treat personal data, and then a lot of things related to the IT, access, disputes with FAS, Roskomnadzor, and all these issues are quite frequent, I would say, these days.
Yeah.
But I should also mention that M&A is still going quite actively, both as regards Russian clients. We are seeing a lot of activity in major ecosystems buying, say, startups with new technical solutions. That is very active. But also other projects, including in the oil and gas industry, natural resources, are still ongoing. And interestingly, we've done quite a number of deals remotely, to the extent, of course, we can. And I do have a sense that the economy is reasonably healthy, with lots of activity going on. It may be not as visible if you are not involved, but I do have a sense that it's life as usual. Very interesting projects happening across many sectors, obviously in the pharma sector, as well in IT, which I already mentioned, and with courts and regulators back in operating mode, we are also seeing lots of activity there as well.
Right. Just for my own curiosity, and perhaps for our listeners, you mentioned oil and gas. Just a short question, short answer, Sergei. Oil and gas, is that mostly domestic local players, or are Western players still active in the sector?
Both are reasonably active, and I should say that major Western players are also considering major projects in this country, and it's still on the agenda.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks. The other area we're both very interested in is pharma and medical, and you say things are going on there. We've got the localization program for many years ongoing in pharma in Russia, and the background, as we know, is that our pharma clients are doing well or very well in Russia in pre-COVID and 2021, and I think the outlook is reasonably good, of course, with the national projects and other things. But on the pharma medical side, well, what's the activity that clients are coming to you for most of all?
Well, unfortunately, I can't obviously share some of the details, but it's both related to localization, to acquiring some of the locally developed products, and we've seen quite a number of transactions going on in this area. What else? Some cooperation involving vaccines, as well as modernizing hospitals, acquiring hospitals. We've seen expansion of private healthcare as well. So the whole range of projects happening in the industry.
Yeah. No, thanks, again. That's what I would have expected to be. And you're absolutely right, of course, expanding private sector of health. And I think, and that'll take me to the next question, investing. because I think executives listening to this who are not based in Moscow, they'd be thinking, well, not a lot of acquiring and activity going on. But as you say, in the pharma sector, people are acquiring some distributors or receivables or whatever, and that's ongoing. That takes me shifting tack a little bit, Sergei. So we've both been in forums where we've spoken to international audiences who are very well aware of the Russian market. And my next question is in two parts. And I know you do this and your colleagues, if you're briefing, visiting CEOs or boards or head of international activity, you know, an American gentleman or a French executive comes in, it can be their first visit to Moscow or their first real acquaintance. What kind of story do you portray for them, and how do you provide reinsurance, you know, to the international investors? Yeah.
Well, I guess we should now speak about sanctions, because yes, sanctions have seriously influenced attitudes in Russia, and this is a major question that clients ask. Essentially, sort of two elements. One is they ask their governments, do you actually want us to do business in Russia? Will you support us when we do business in Russia? And although sanctions send a mixed signal, Western sanctions send a mixed signal in this regard, still I think Western governments support, and that's what we hear, they support companies from, say, the US or the EU that do business in Russia, or that they want to invest in Russia. And the same is true about the attitude of the Russian authorities. They say, yes, we also support investors, we welcome investors. However, sanctions have promoted a sentiment in Russia that we can go it alone, and that Western assistance or involvement is sort of irrelevant. I think sanctions have destroyed the most favored status which foreign investors had in Russia previously in the 90s and after that. And in the past, when you are a foreign investor, this made you somewhat privileged in Russia. Bad guys, say local players or bureaucrats, were cautious. They were worried about a negative resonance if they did something to a foreign investor. So that, I think, has gone. Currently, in most cases, Western companies are treated as if they are local. And privately, government officials mention that there is a sanctions war going on, so you shouldn't expect any special treatment. And essentially, this means that to be successful in this market, you have to be better, you have to be smarter, you have to be fully compliant, and navigate uncertainties in a sophisticated way. Meaning that you have to be more appraised of local nuance issues. What are the local interests? What are the regulations? What is the reason, for instance, if you have a problem, and how to address it? And in that sense, for me as a lawyer, it makes things a little bit more interesting, because really solutions have to be more creative, more sophisticated. It's not just sort of going to someone high up and discussing and then solving it. You really have to work the local network, local issues, local courts to get a problem go away. But that said, I still feel that companies that are really focused, that can have a meaningful dialogue with local players, succeed and get very good margins as a result. So in my view, sanctions have made the market a bit more sophisticated, more mature, but at the same time, of course, more challenging. But other things make the market also more challenging and unpredictable and ambiguous. That's the world we are living in. Yes, so I am positive on the Russian economy generally, because I think it's going in the right direction. I think that the government is pursuing a very focused economic policy. The central bank is quite well functioning and well led. So with that, I think that creates a reasonable business environment for companies that work in this market. I must say that we are not seeing too many new entrants to the market for obvious reasons, because of the pandemic and because of issues. But those that still enter the market, again, these are the issues they are considering, and our advice is normally with a focused strategy, with the right personnel in place, you can be very successful in this market. And I think, I mean, I normally say that I feel we are quite successful as a business here, and I'm very positive about our prospects.
By the way, just follow on a couple of things there. I recently was having this kind of discussion with a manufacturing company, and you're absolutely right, new investment, but globally also is down, and certainly in Russia for specific reasons. But I did a quick trawl through some of the sources I have, and Sergei, in 10 minutes, I found 20, 30 examples of investment in 2020, 21, exactly what you said, of companies already there in Russia, building new production lines or looking for new manufacturing facilities, retail outlets, and so on. So absolutely right, it does go on. You've answered the question in a way, and I share that you've described it very well, how it's changed attitudes and so on. I think sanctions are now, for the companies on the ground, are very manageable. And my own view is, given the way the world is, I don't see the Europeans wanting to increase or intensify sanctions. I don't see President Biden wanting to do that, but Congress might have a different view. It's a tricky question, and just your personal opinion, really. Going forward, in the next year or two, do you think sanctions will be getting worse or stable or better from where they are now?
I expect them, frankly, in a way, they are irrelevant.
Good point.
Because people have got used to sanctions. I think it is clear that the market is never empty. So in a way, sanctions open opportunities for other players to fill in basically the gap. And I do hope that the Biden and the Putin meeting in June will stabilize expectations and create, as stated, a more predictable environment. And that would be very good for businesses, because we do crave predictability and a bit of stability in the very unstable world that we've seen in the last year or so.
I trust we'll have a more adult relationship than we had with President Putin and President Trump. And let's see, maybe that's a low hurdle to compare it with. But I think that we've done on sanctions, thanks a lot. You touched upon, I'd just like to flesh out before I ask you about compliance, although maybe link now. You talked about IT and software, and that's, in the media, it's getting impact. And could you elaborate a little more on that? We're seeing the deglobalization of digital. Russia is part of that trend. Sometimes in draft and newspaper reports, there's the horror stories of what's going to happen in IT, and then thankfully later it's modified. But what's the real thing going on at the moment, worrying your IT clients, and how do you see that developing in the next year or two?
Well, yes, frankly, we see pressure from authorities and new regulation coming up with a view to localize internet sites. I don't know if you know, but the Parliament, the State Duma, has just adopted, started reviewing a law that would require internet sites, web pages, other information systems with Russian audiences to have local offices.
Mm-hmm.
And there seems to be flexibility there. You can have a local subsidiary or a branch, basically with a view to be liable for things that are done locally, for the focus on the Russian audiences, removing content that is illegal. And we've seen increased fines for that, and you read in the papers that this or that company has been slapped by a significant fine for not removing content. But again, as in other countries, this is an industry that will be further regulated, and Russia obviously is trying to do that. That is creating uncertainty and issues for our clients. But overall, I would think that that's a global trend, and we will see more regulation. Hopefully, after new laws are adopted and clients get used to them and comply with them. Obviously, localization is also another issue that is top of mind. Russia is trying to, as regards its critical infrastructure, to promote the local industry, and you're aware that recently there were tax breaks for Russian IT companies. So there is a lot of movement going on in the industry.
And as you said, I think there is an element of carrot and stick, incentive and pressures there too. And your conclusion, I agree with. It's drifting to saying something like it will be manageable, and as you say, companies adapt, and so long it's not fundamentally critical, companies have a great deal of resilience in markets like Russia for sure. And both of us know that companies want to be there, and as we've implied, sales, ROI, profitability, despite anything and everything, remain good. That's the good news. On the ground, Sergei, I think the executives we're working directly with in Russia are very aware, that the buzzword compliance. But again, if you were directing yourself to an American board meeting, if they were not so well attuned to the Russian market, there'd be a lot of skepticism and fear. But compliance is an issue across the world in China, India, Africa, LATAM, Middle East, and developed markets. How do you portray the compliance story to the international executives on the one hand, and then to your more, let's say, more knowledgeable executives running up businesses in Russia?
It is one of the top priorities because as a multinational player, you face a risk in the sense that because of the political tensions, a bureaucrat thinks that if he's discovered an issue with a multinational client, that may be a source of accolade from people, from his bosses. And if previously, as I said, it could have been avoided just by saying, look, we are a foreign investor, we are investing in this country, we've made a minor mistake, sorry for this, we will sort of not repeat this in the future. This requires more attention, more problems in the current climate. But it is very important to, from the start, build a proper compliance system, get trained, if you, for instance, are integrating a Russian company that you've acquired into your global network, it is very important to get people who are familiar with global compliance issues, FCPA, and etc., etc., and obviously monitor this regularly. Instill a corporate spirit that you have globally or in your headquarters, and that helps avoid major problems, because both tax compliance, regulatory compliance is very important. And we've seen a lot of, well, clients now and then get hit if they're not compliant. And again, Russia is very high on the corruption index. Everybody aware of that. So having compliance programs that prevent people from doing bad things is a top priority in this market. And we've also seen that Russian local companies are paying a lot of attention to this, basically introducing compliance programs, and are quite focused on addressing this issue as well. So it's a general trend.
Indeed. As you were talking there, Sergei, something came to mind, which is coming up more and more with our group members. And I didn't flag this before, but I'm sure you have an opinion on it and give us a general response. ESG, environment, social, corporate governance. I'll give you a couple of seconds to think about it, but my background is, we're seeing this globally. I sometimes wonder whether it's just PR, and then I have a sort of a more cynical, old-style thought about the Soviet Union and Russia. Does it really matter? Would Russian companies be that bothered? Now, I fully understand that view could be out of date. And, we are hearing a lot of changes going on. And I noticed Mr. Deripaska was in the news recently about the portfolio of businesses they were looking at for the green impact as well. So could you just give us a little bit of a summary on that trend from your perspective, personal and the company? Is it really developing? Is it something big or not?
It is developing. I think it will be big, because you cannot be competitive. I don't think you can be successful in the current world unless you make ESG as one of your priorities. I don't think this is just talk, because I mean, corporate governance, for instance, starting from a subject that is very familiar for me, it's probably maybe a decade of work already, and despite all the difficulties, I think everybody is very clear that if you are good at corporate governance, your company will do very well as regards shareholders and as regards operations. Environment, I think, in Russia has obviously been a bit slow, but I mean, Norilsk nickel and the huge fine that was slapped on it just very vividly highlights that Russia has to address the issue. And then all things social, the pandemic has highlighted that basically the state of your workforce is critical for your business. Mental well-being, addressing innovation, reskilling, redistributing talent, all this just affects your resilience and the way you operate in the unpredictable market that exists. So from this perspective, I would think that companies that are successful with ESG would generally have a competitive advantage, and companies that think that this is something that has been invented by people who are pretending to address important things, they will sort of fail in a way.
Right, thank you. We're going to have, I've been persuaded by this by listening to our group members, and we're going to do a webinar on this in the summer, and we'll let you be well informed about that. And I'd like to invite you onto the panel to give your perspective. You gave it just very briefly now, and you'll have time to think about it, Sergei, because I think you say it is developing and it will be big. That's what I take away from your remarks. Thanks a lot. Time reasons, we're doing nicely and closing out soon, but you addressed the final topic from my side anyway, just in your remarks there, human resources, the work from home. I know you're doing this recording with us from your office in Moscow. The general trend back certainly has been people were very satisfied and pleasantly shocked at how good the translation to work from home went. And at the moment, I'm seeing in Moscow for Western investor companies, at the moment, at the end of May 2021, you've got maybe 20-25% of staff rotating in the office. Companies are looking at increasing that in the next month or September the 1st. And you have a few who say global headquarters have said nothing this year really in the office. They are a minority. On the other hand, Russian companies, the culture is a bit different, and you tend to have 50, 60, 70, 80% in the office as well. And final point, within the Western companies, there is a range. So my questions, Sergei, are what's your attitude, and thoughts as your firm and managing partner on the office structure? An ignorant remark might be legal work lends itself to work from home. Does it? And you've talked about the welfare of people and everything. After 14 months certainly in Central Europe, people are getting tired of it. We've had less lockdown in Russia. So how have your staff adapted to it, and what changes do you think there will be?
I think we've done very well. Remote was natural. I think we had a mental barrier to working remotely because factually we were working remotely. I mean, as a lawyer, you travel a lot, you work from anywhere essentially. But an office in our mind was a very important element. So I think it will remain to be important, but for different reasons. It's not so much a place where you work. I think we should turn our office more into a place where you collaborate, where you exchange experiences, where you learn. And hybrid work is here to stay.
Yeah.
I would think that maybe, I don't know, we will consider whether we will have 2 days fully remote or fully flexible and 3 days in the office. We recently did a survey basically asking our people, it was quite a long one, on how they were affected by the remote working.
Mm-hmm.
And the sizable number of people said they actually enjoyed it because you don't have to travel.
Yeah.
You have basically more time with your family. At the same time, and we know, I mean, you have to work like around the clock. It's very difficult to manage your time because you wake up, you open the laptop, and you close it when it's nearly midnight. So in this perspective, we have to manage this. We have to train people a lot on how to cope with stress, on how to organize themselves. I think as employers, we have to be more listening to organizing flexible working, ensuring that there are breaks, ensuring that people take time off, and essentially focusing on the well-being of our people and helping them to deal with mental crisis, and at the same time take care of themselves, and train our leaders to be more reactive, to be more humane, and I think that's culturally aware, basically lead with purpose. This is extremely important for remote work to really be successful. We haven't seen any effect on productivity by remote work. I think we can make it work, but it does require additional training. It does require additional attention, new protocols, new procedures, including involving clients as well.
Thanks. No, I think you put your finger on it there, and most of the studies I'm seeing globally and within Russia suggest, people are actually working longer hours, which might improve the productivity, but you're right, increases their tiredness and stress and strain. I think another truism we've seen is that, from a manager's perspective, are people well behaved in the sense of doing work at home? Yes, they are. But I think the truism that's coming out a lot is that many managers are saying, my very good employees, staff in the office, are the very good ones at home, and those who are less good in the office are less good at home. So, those things run through, but that's certainly a factor. And your 3 days in, 2 days out, or in, out, 3-2 seems to be the proportions that many companies, I think, will be using in the future. And of course, we're talking with many of our staff, and maybe from a legal side, our colleagues, sorry, and some companies have already moved offices, some have downsized, some have got rid of a floor or something like that. Some are, of course, stuck in leases, so they can't change so much. So I think that will be a driver for the future. Thanks a lot, Sergei. Sergei, I said, I gave us a sort of a time period for this conversation, and we're there. It's been very enjoyable. But to the end of it, is there anything you think we've missed out, or you'd like to elaborate a bit more, or a closing remark?
I think we've covered quite a number of very interesting subjects. I guess I was sort of thinking that in terms of the workforce, we have to go big on education and training, because you have to develop soft skills, new communications ways. I mean, being on Zoom, just training people to be effective with Zoom communications is very important, and it increases the impact you have on the counterparties. And maybe the second thing is we should focus on effective communication and recognize the humanity of the situation, because people are facing so many challenges, and without effectively communicating what has to be achieved, why you are trying to achieve this, and listening to people and being kind to them in a state where everybody is feeling the pressure, I feel that that's very important for businesses as well to succeed.
Thanks, okay. By the way, one of your colleagues in your HR team was on one of our webinars recently and gave a great outline. And one of the things we talked about, technical, boring in a way, was overtime, and how do you manage that legally, technically. That was an important topic. And you've addressed these things about stress and work behavior in a serious way, and they are serious. If I may, I'll finish off on a light-hearted comment on this, which is in the legal sector. I don't know if you know this story, and I'll share it with you. Our colleagues can edit this part of this conversation out if they wish, but I think it should stay in. I'm informed that in America, there is now a new feature of work life and medical life called Zoom bottom, Zoom popo, which of course means, as you said, people are sitting in meetings for too long. They're sitting at their desks for too long. And in America, where else, some employees of some companies are taking their companies to court and suing them for their medical treatment of Zoom bottom. Their bottoms have been misadjusted or hurt from sitting down too much at meetings. Now, that is America, you know, and only in America, and I'm sure Zoom bottom does not exist in Russia. So, anyway, if Baker McKenzie are handling any of those cases in America, please let us know. We'd like to see how how they're litigated.
Well, I will. I'm aware that not in Russia. In Russia, you have to move a lot just to survive. So that's a feature.
Okay, I think we'll stop the conversation on bottoms there, and but it's a light-hearted way to look at the serious things of business. Sergei, I was looking forward to this. It's been very, very enjoyable. You have an immense decades of knowledge and a strategic picture of things, and I always love listening to you. I think your comments also on the sanctions about the, you know, not necessarily impacting on the bottom line quarter per quarter, but you know how they affected the mentality of business. I think it's a very crucial and big point. So much appreciated. And once again, a formal thank you and an informal thank you.
It's a pleasure, Danny. Thank you very much as well.
Pleasure.